Hi guys, in this video we'll be looking at externality diagrams and then we'll be finishing off with a summary.
Okay, so we've had a briefer introduction to what our externality diagrams look like, but the obvious reason that we're going to be using them is to analyze the effect of externalities through our externality diagram. And we're going to be building in our concepts that we've seen with costs and benefits to complete our analysis when it comes down to our externalities. But first, just to get a grasp of how we are using our externality diagrams, we're going to be making an assumption. And that assumption is that there are no externalities in a market. So through this exercise, we should be able to recognize how we are using our costs and our benefit curves that we've already learned about before. But first, let's think about what our different types of externalities are. Well, the first one is going to be positive externalities. And we learned that that is another way to say external benefit. And our other kind of externality is negative externalities, which was another way to say that there is an external cost on society as a result of someone producing or consuming. So our assumption is that there are no externalities within our market. So what is the consequence of that? Well, this means that we are only going to be thinking about private costs and private benefits. So if there are no externalities, we should only be seeing private costs and private benefits. So let's explore this point a little bit further. Let's first start off with our private benefits. And we know that private benefits are enjoyed by the consumption of a product, and those who are consuming are described as consumers, and another economic agent is going to be our households as well. So our consumers, they are going to be the ones that are demanding goods in the market. And remember, the market is where our exchange happens. They're going to be consuming because they're looking to derive some sort of benefit from consuming that good or service. So that benefit could be something as simple as getting a specific utility out of it. They might be consuming that thing for a specific cause. They might be gaining some sort of health benefits. They might be purchasing that good because it's more cost effective. And there's lots of different benefits that we can imagine that a consumer has. But what this means is that our demand curve is therefore equal to the marginal private benefit, or the MPB, of the product. So remember, our marginal private benefit curve is going to be downward sloping as we are experiencing diminishing marginal utility from consuming more of a good, and that's going to be like our demand curve. And why is it the case that it's like our demand curve? Well, this is because our demand curve actually represents the willingness a consumer has to pay for each unit of a good. So suppose we take a quantity of, say, 10 here, and then we're going to say that a consumer, based off of their marginal private benefit curve, says that to me that is worth £9. So the willingness that the consumer has to pay for the 10th unit is going to be £9, and therefore is equal to the marginal private benefit for that unit of the good. And then because we are experiencing diminishing marginal utility, if we say increase our quantity to 15, then we expect our marginal private benefit to fall as we receive less marginal benefit from consuming such a large quantity, or a relatively larger quantity, as opposed to 10. So that's why our marginal private benefit curve is downward sloping. And in sum, this means that the willingness to pay for each additional unit is going to be equal to the marginal private benefit. And as there are no externalities in the market, the marginal private benefit is therefore equal to the marginal social benefit. So if we have our marginal private benefit here, remember our marginal social benefit is the sum of the marginal private benefit and the marginal external benefit. But given that there is no external benefit, as we have no positive externalities, we would say that the marginal private benefit is going to be equal to our marginal social benefit. So if we put all of this together, where we say that in the market there are no externalities and that demand is going to be equal to our marginal private benefit, and if our marginal private benefit is equal to a marginal social benefit, then demand will equal our marginal social benefit too. So this is quite a stark conclusion that we've found, where we have these three different curves equal to each other, where we might have initially thought that they were not equal to each other. But we've seen how, with the logic that we've developed, given that we have no positive externalities or negative externalities, we can come to this conclusion using the explanations that we've talked about above. So now let's move on to the other side of the equation, which is going to be talking about private costs. And private costs is something that producers are going to pay as a result of producing a product. So our producers are described as such because they are responsible for the supply into a market. And we know that for a supply to happen, there's going to be certain costs, which include our fixed costs, our FC, which would be something like rent. And then variable costs as well, VC, which is something like wages that are having to be paid as a result of production. And we know furthermore that our supply curve is going to be equal to our marginal private cost curve, or the MPC of the product. And remember, the MPC, or the private cost, is going to be the thing that the firm is facing quite directly, and it's realized to them in the price mechanism. And therefore, the MPC looks like our marginal cost curve, and therefore it looks like our supply curve. This is because if we know that the firm can earn more profits, as if the price is higher, then that means they're going to increase their quantity. So it's the same logic as to why the MPC is equal to the supply line as we did. So the logic that the MPC is equal to the supply line is the same as how we derived the marginal cost curve, where if the firm is looking to increase the quantity that they are supplying, then the marginal cost is increasing. And to know that, we just need to review the total cost curve, which we've done in previous videos. Now, as there are no externalities in our market, we can further infer that the marginal private cost is going to be equal to our marginal social cost. So we know this is the case for a similar reason as we saw with our marginal private benefit. So our marginal social cost is the same as our marginal private benefit because there is no external cost. So there's no marginal external cost, and therefore our MPC is equal to our marginal social cost. So if we put all of these things together, we can say that with a market that has no externalities, the supply is equal to our marginal private cost. And given that there are no externalities, the marginal private cost is equal to our marginal social cost. Therefore, supply is also equal to the marginal social cost. So again, a very stark conclusion here, where we have our three things: the marginal private cost, the marginal social cost, and the supply all being the same when we are dealing with a market with no externalities. If we put all of these pieces together and think about a market with no externalities, the market equilibrium is the point where demand is equal to supply. And this is something that is quite common already to us. So our supply line is equal to the marginal private cost, equal to the marginal social cost, which is equal to our supply, and our demand is the marginal private benefit is equal to the marginal social benefit, which is equal to demand. Now, we know at the point of equilibrium here, where we have the equilibrium quantity being Q1, and then we have the equilibrium price being P1 here, at our equilibrium, our supply is equal to our demand. But given that our demand is equal to the marginal social benefit and the marginal private benefit, then we are able to see the following conclusion, which is that supply is equal to demand, which is equal to the marginal private cost, which is equal to the marginal social cost, which is equal to the marginal private benefit, which is equal to the marginal social benefit. So again, this is a very strong looking conclusion here, where we have all of these different things that we've looked at in isolation are now all equal to each other in this singular diagram for supply and demand. But you should be quite comfortable with the logic, where we're dealing with an example where we made the assumption that there are no externalities, and therefore we are able to come to this conclusion. And the reason that we can is because there are no externalities, and therefore the effect of external cost and external benefits is not affecting our market, and therefore we can come up with this result.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're looking for an amazing A-level economics resource, Join me today in my series of engaging bite-sized video tutorials. Just click the SnapRevise smiley face and together let's make A-level economics a walk in the park.